the Sega 32X, with a complete library of new 32-bit games.
And right now, International Paging is offering display pagers for only $15 per month.
But the real genius of this Betamax is its price.
Sometimes manufacturers or companies have intentions. They want to produce a product that helps people and makes life generally easy and fun. But what happens when the product is overwhelming or underwhelming and just refuses to do what it was intended to do? It's Memory Surge. My name is Kevin, and we reveal the 20 items from the 1990s that failed. Let's get to it right after you subscribe, of course.
The Newton Connection Kit lets you connect your Newton to your PC or your Macintosh and share and store information.
Apple Newton. The Apple Newton was supposed to be the future, but then it was launched in 1993. It was one of the world's first personal digital assistants, which we also know as PDAs, and Apple marketed it as a handheld computer that could do everything from taking notes to sending emails. One of its biggest features was its handwriting recognition, but that turned out to be its biggest failure. The device often misunderstood users' handwriting, and it led to funny but frustrating errors. On top of that, the Newton was bulky. It was about the size of a VHS tape and ridiculously expensive, as it was selling for around $700 at launch. Now that's a lot for something that couldn't even recognize basic words properly. It also had poor battery life and limited app support. Despite all its futuristic goals, the tech just wasn't there yet. Eventually, Apple Newton flopped and was discontinued by 1998.
Hi, introducing new Crystal from Pepsi, the first citrus cola.
Crystal Pepsi. Crystal Pepsi came out in the early 90s with what people referred to as a strange promise. It looked like water, but tasted like Pepsi. It had no caffeine, no coloring, and was supposed to represent a pure and healthier soda. The idea was clever on paper, as the clear drinks were trendy, but it didn't go the way Pepsi hoped. At first, people were weirded out. When they sipped Crystal Pepsi, their eyes saw one thing, but their taste buds felt another. It was like drinking soda with the look of Sprite, but the flavor of Pepsi, your brain just couldn't connect the dots. Critics also said it didn't taste exactly like regular Pepsi, more like watered-down cola. The marketing campaign was huge, but the hype didn't last. After a brief run between 1992 and 1993, Pepsi thought it best to wrap it up. Microsoft Bob. In 1995, Microsoft launched one of its strangest products ever, Microsoft Bob. It was meant to make using a computer easier for beginners, especially those who found Windows too confusing. Instead of folders and menus, Bob gave users a virtual house where they could click on cartoon items like a desk or a dog to open programs. The idea was to make computers friendly, but Bob ended up being more annoying than helpful. It was unbelievably childish and slow, and many users felt like Microsoft was talking down to them. The cartoon characters, especially the dog named Rover, tried to guide you through tasks, but they just got in the way. Bob also needed more power than most people's computers had at the time, making it frustrating to use. And to make it worse, it had a $100 price tag. People didn't waste time passing it on it. Consequently, sales became terrible, and Microsoft quietly killed it after just 1 year.
The new Genesis 32X processor changes your Sega Genesis system and CD system into a 32-bit machine.
The Sega 32X. In the mid-1990s, Sega was in trouble. The Sega Genesis indeed did well, but it was getting old. Instead of releasing a full new console, Sega came up with the 32X, which was a bulky add-on that plugged into the Genesis to boost its power. The idea was to bring 32-bit graphics to the aging Genesis while players waited for the Sega Saturn. However, from the start, the 32X was a mess. It was expensive, confusing to set up, and had very few games worth playing. Most developers weren't interested in making games for a device with such a small audience, and players didn't want to spend more money on an add-on for a system that was clearly on its way out. To make things worse, Sega launched the Saturn just months later, making the 32X instantly outdated. It felt like Sega was trying to exploit players rather than give them something truly new. Sales dipped, and Sega needed no special nudge to stop supporting it.
If you're looking for a DVD player, make sure you choose one with DivX.
DivX, Digital Video Express. Before Netflix and streaming took over, DVDs were king. But in 1998, Circuit City and a few tech companies thought they had the next big thing. Wait a minute. This DivX is not to be confused with the video format of the same name. This DivX was a weird DVD system where you bought a disc cheaply, watched it once, and then had to pay more to watch it again. Now, you are wondering what the catch is. You needed a special DVD player connected to a phone line to unlock the disc. If you didn't pay again after the first viewing window, the movie would lock you out. It was like buying a rental disc that became useless unless you kept feeding it money. Needless to say, people hated it. The concept felt greedy, and the added tech requirements were annoying. In addition, regular DVDs were already doing fine without all that hassle. Movie lovers didn't want to deal with extra fees or worry about phone connections just to watch a film. By 1999, just a year after launch, DivX flopped hard. Circuit City took a massive loss and shut it down. Virtual Boy, Nintendo. The Virtual Boy was Nintendo's first attempt at a 3D gaming console. And guess what? Saying it went wrong was putting it mildly. It was released in 1995 and looked like a mix between a VR headset and a table-mounted telescope. The first discouraging thing about it was that you had to bend down and peer into it to play. It was pretty uncomfortable. The graphics were all in harsh red and black, which caused eye strain and headaches for many players. It was supposed to be immersive, but the low-quality visuals and lack of color made it feel more like a punishment than a fun experience. It didn't end there. The portable system wasn't really portable at all. It had to sit on a table, and there were no straps or real mobility. On top of that, it only had a small handful of games, none of which really showed off the promised 3D effect. Nintendo barely supported the system, and it was pulled from the shelves within a year. Coors Rocky Mountain Sparkling Water. In the early 1990s, Coors thought it best to jump into the bottled water craze. Their idea was to sell sparkling water using the same clean mountain water they used in their beer. So they launched Coors Rocky Mountain Sparkling Water, a product that sounded fancy but quickly went downhill. The problem was that it got people confused. Coors was known for beer, not water. Many consumers assumed it had alcohol in it, while others didn't trust drinking something pure from a beer company. The branding didn't help either, as it looked a lot like Coors beer packaging, which made it even more misleading. On top of that, the sparkling water market was already getting crowded. Brands like Perrier and later La Croix were gaining steam, and Coors just didn't stand out. It wasn't clear who their target audience was, and the product didn't taste any better or offer anything unique. Pogs. If you were a kid in the 1990s, chances were you either played Pogs or had a giant tube full of them under your bed. These cardboard discs with colorful designs were based on an old Hawaiian game and exploded in popularity across schools worldwide. All you needed was a stack of Pogs and a slammer to start flipping over your opponent's Pogs to win them. They were easy to collect, cheap to buy, and came in endless designs like cartoons, skulls, glitter, and even brand logos. Kids treated them like gold. For a moment it felt like they were here to stay, but just as fast as they arrived, Pogs disappeared. It was as though parents got tired of buying new sets, teachers banned them in schools, and kids moved on to newer, shinier trends like Pokemon cards and Tamagotchis. Also, there was no real skill involved in the game, so it got old quickly.
And Sony Betamax records a sharper picture than VHS.
Betamax, too late edition. Sony's Betamax actually came out before VHS in the late 70s, and it was technically better. But by the time the 1990s rolled around, VHS had taken over completely. Regardless, Sony refused to let go. They continued pushing updated Betamax machines and tapes into the market, hoping something would change. Guess what? It didn't. By the 90s, almost every video rental store was stacked with VHS tapes. Movies were released on VHS first, and Betamax users were left with fewer and fewer options. Even Sony started making VHS players because they couldn't fight the demand. People didn't want to juggle two formats. They wanted one system that worked with what everyone else had. VHS offered longer recording times, cheaper machines, and more content. So Betamax, despite being higher quality, slowly faded into tech obscurity. Reebok pump shoes, second wave. In the early 90s, Reebok pump shoes were the definition of cool. If you pressed the little orange basketball on the tongue, the shoes would inflate for a custom fit. Athletes wore them. Kids begged their parents for them. It was a whole vibe. So when Reebok brought back the pump technology for a second wave later in the decade, they expected another hit, but it didn't quite land. By then, the novelty had worn off, and newer sneaker brands were dominating the market with lighter, sleeker, more stylish shoes. But that's not all. The pump mechanism wasn't as durable as it looked. After some wear, it would stop working, deflate too fast, or break completely. People realized they were paying a premium for a gimmick that didn't really help performance and dumped it.
Well, if it isn't Tamagotchi, her new favorite pet.
Yes!
So what's that make me, fish sticks?
Oh, are you hungry?
Tamagotchi Spinoffs. Tamagotchis were a massive hit in the late 90s. These digital pets from Japan needed feeding, cleaning, and care. They'd die. Kids were obsessed. So naturally, a wave of spin-offs followed. There were Giga Pets, Nano Babies, Digimon, and dozens of random off-brand ones. The problem, however, was that most of them were low-quality cash grabs. Some didn't work properly. Others had glitchy graphics or confusing controls. And unlike the original Tamagotchi, they didn't feel that special. It was obvious they were knockoffs. Parents got overwhelmed and kids got bored fast. The charm of caring for a tiny pixelated pet wore off once the market got flooded with cheaper, broken versions. Teachers also banned them in schools because they were distracting. By the early 2000s, the craze was over. Only a few digital pets, like the original Tamagotchi and Digimon, stuck around. Zubaz Pants. These baggy elastic waist pants exploded in popularity in the early 90s, especially among gym rats and football fans. They were meant to be comfy and stretchy for working out. And they were, but let's be honest, they looked ridiculous. The bold patterns made them stand out for all the wrong reasons. Unless you were lifting weights or cheering for your team, Zubaz didn't belong in public. For a moment, they became a fashion statement, but soon they became the punchline. Even people who wore them started making fun of them. By the late 90s, Zubaz had become the unofficial uniform of people who stopped caring about style altogether. Windows ME. Windows Millennium Edition, better known as Windows ME, was supposed to be a fresh new version of Microsoft's operating system in 2000, but instead of being a step forward, it turned into a nightmare for many users. Right out of the box, Windows ME was buggy. It crashed often, froze randomly, and had major compatibility issues with software and hardware. It was clearly built more for looks than stability, and most users felt like it was rushed out the door before it was truly ready. The system also removed the real mode DOS support that many power users relied on, which only added to the frustration. Even basic tasks like printing or installing programs could turn into a headache. It was so bad that people who upgraded from Windows 98 regretted it. Businesses avoided it completely. Microsoft quickly moved on and released Windows XP just a year later, practically pretending ME never happened. To this day, Windows ME is often mentioned as one of the worst versions of Windows ever made. It tried to be the future, but it barely worked in the present.
McDonald's Arch Deluxe. If it were any more grown up, we'd need to check your ID.
McDonald's Arch Deluxe. In the mid-90s, McDonald's decided to try something different. They wanted to create a grown-up burger called the Arch Deluxe. It came with fancy mustard sauce, peppered bacon, and a potato bun. The goal was to attract adults who thought McDonald's was just for kids. They spent over $100 million on marketing, one of the most expensive ad campaigns ever at the time. Commercials showed kids frowning at the burger while adults enjoyed it. But here's the thing. No one really wanted a fancy McDonald's burger. People go to McDonald's for something fast and familiar, not upscale. On top of that, the Arch Deluxe wasn't that special. It was just okay. It wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't worth the price or the hype. Customers didn't bite, and the sandwich flopped. Shortly after, McDonald's pulled it from the menu and lost millions in the process. HarleyDavidson Perfume. Harley-Davidson is known for motorcycles, leather jackets, and the open road. What it was not known for was perfume. However, in the 90s, the company decided to try branching out and launched a line of colognes and perfumes. The idea was to sell the Harley lifestyle in a bottle. But most people weren't interested in smelling like leather, oil, or whatever mix they thought represented the biker image. It just didn't translate. The branding was confusing. People weren't sure if it was a joke or a real product. Even loyal Harley fans weren't buying it. Perfume didn't match the rugged, rebellious image Harley had built for decades. Instead of boosting their brand, it watered it down. Sales were weak and the products were discontinued not long after. It became one of those strange, what were they thinking, moments in brand history.
On food! Heinz Easy Squirt. It's fun for your food.
Easy Squirt. Colored ketchup. In the late 90s, Heinz thought it would be fun to shake up the dinner table by introducing Easy Squirt colored ketchup. It came in wild colors like purple, green, and even blue. Aimed at kids, the ketchup came in a squeezable bottle shaped like a rocket, promising fun and creativity at mealtime. And sure, at first kids were into it. Parents bought it once for the novelty. But after the fun wore off, most people realized something. Colored ketchup was kind of gross. Purple or green ketchup just didn't look right on a burger or fries. It messed with your brain. Plus, it didn't taste any different from regular ketchup, but it felt like it should. It confused adults and weirded out picky eaters. Eventually, the hype fizzled out and sales dropped fast. By the mid-2000s, the product was totally gone, almost as if it didn't exist.
The amazing Sony Miniisk is the digital way to record your music on a disc.
Minidisk. Minidiscs were actually a pretty cool idea. They were released in the early 90s by Sony and were small, rewritable discs that combined the best of CDs and cassettes. You could record music, skip tracks easily, and they were quite compact and durable. But then the timing was off. CDs were already dominating the market, and soon after, MP3s and digital music players like the iPod took over. Most people didn't want to invest in a whole new format when CDs worked just fine, and MP3s offered even more convenience. Mini-disc players were also pricey, and music labels didn't rush to release albums in the format. That meant people had to record music onto the discs themselves, which wasn't as easy as popping in a CD. So even though mini-discs were ahead in some ways, they just couldn't catch on. Sony pushed hard, but the market had already moved on. Tough luck, you can say. New Coke 2 or Coke with lemon? Coca-Cola had already learned a painful lesson with New Coke in the 1980s, but in the 1990s, they just couldn't leave well enough alone. New Coke 2 and Coke with lemon. The first was a rebranded version of the failed New Coke, trying to sneak it back under a new name. The second was a twist on the original flavor, adding a citrus zing that most people didn't ask for. The problem? People love classic Coke for a reason. It's simple, familiar, and has a taste that has stood the test of time. Tweaking it, even slightly, just didn't sit right with customers. Coke with lemon especially threw people off. The lemon flavor tasted artificial and weird with cola. It was supposed to be refreshing. The opposite was the case. At best, it was confusing. It was not rocket science for them to see, so they stopped producing. Beepers, pagers for kids. A thing for like 5 minutes.
Mom, we got a better idea. We'll page you.
Beepers or pagers for kids. Beepers, or pagers, were pretty popular among professionals in the 90s, especially among doctors, business people. Even teens trying to look cool were not an exception. But at some point, companies thought to include kids too. So brightly colored pagers marketed toward children started making it to the shelves. The idea was that parents could stay in touch with their kids at all times. Sounds good in theory, right? But there were a few problems. First, kids weren't really going anywhere without adult supervision, so why would they need a pager? Second, pagers could only send short numeric messages, and you had to call a separate number to send one. Not exactly convenient. To top it off, once kids actually had them, they weren't that fun. You couldn't play games or chat like you could with a Game Boy or, later, a cell phone. The novelty wore off fast. By the time cell phones and instant messaging came along, kid-friendly pagers looked completely outdated. Barbie Video Girl? Barbie has been everything, from an astronaut to a doctor. But in 2010, Mattel released Barbie Video Girl. This doll had a tiny camera in her necklace and a small screen on her back, which allowed kids to record video through Barbie's eyes. At first, most especially on paper, it sounded innovative to combine play with tech, but it didn't take long for people to raise eyebrows. Privacy experts and parents were concerned. A doll with a hidden camera recording inside homes and kids' bedrooms? That set off alarms. Even the FBI later issued a warning, saying the doll could be misused for recording children without detection. Barbie Video Girl quickly went from fun toy to serious concern. Sales dropped and stores stopped promoting it. Mattel tried to move on without making too much noise. Which of these items do you remember or use? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.